foods,
Right.
What are 6 foods that you have control over? That you have control over what you put in your mouth.
Sure.
You may not be able to have control over the air you breathe,
Right.
but you have control over what you eat.
Yeah.
Give me a half a dozen foods that you believe are some really good foods for preventing cancer.
Right. Well, you think about the superfoods, right? Because a lot of foods may contain high calories and some minerals and vitamins. They might not be as densely, say proportionally speaking, there because we've got to counteract so much in our environment. Where it may have been simple enough to grow your own food and eat all of the food as it was grown, I believe right now we're dealing with extraordinary times, maybe catastrophic in the devastation to the environment. And because of that, just selecting certain foods that I think would be good. Like, I'm not personally a big fan of beets. I had an allergy to it as a child. I believe now, looking back, that I wasn't allergic to beets, but because beets have such a powerful beneficial impact to the liver, for instance, that it was helping me to detoxify, and it was misinterpreted as an allergy, for instance. So that's a great food. Superfoods and super greens. Kale is an excellent food that contains a lot of good things. Sea vegetation. If you can find non-irradiated, non-contaminated forms of sea vegetation, and there are many strains of this, create the most minerally rich, abundant superfoods on the planet. We need to look also at the mineral content for the connective tissue. I talked about silica. Most of the foods, unfortunately, that we eat have been robbed of these trace elements because industry has found it much more profitable to take those minerals and use them for different reasons, and they leave us with the deficient foods. So we talk about something like silica. You could go to something like the horsetail extract, something that you could grow and make into a tea yourself or concentrate in a whole food form from a tea. And now you have an abundance of silica, which again is one of those trace minerals so critical, and the only time you'll find it in a health food store, it's in the little beauty section for women that want to have better nails or hair or skin. And yet we ignore the fact that it's the integrity of the entire connective tissue of the body. The vascular system as well is dependent upon that humble trace element that's been removed from most foods. We talk about foods like whole grains that used to contain abundant amounts of chromium. And they've been robbed of the chromium because the soils don't contain it or industry refines it out. Chromium, why do we need that? The form that I talk about is grown as food because it manages what? Sugar, blood sugar. It helps to deliver it successfully into the cells and mobilize it out of the cells should we need it if we don't have enough coming in from external sources. And then we see as Dr. Buttar calls it, the obligate glucose metabolizer, cancer, really taking advantage of the fact that we are chromium deficient. It has access to the sugar very readily because we don't have the chromium necessary to bind it and help deliver it so the cancer cells can't get it. So that'd be another aspect. Other foods like Brazil nuts are rich in selenium, although we see as well now lower than it was. And we need, for real metabolic benefit of selenium, higher quantities than we're getting just from Brazil nuts and other foods. So concentrating the selenium in a food-grown source or form is going to be critical. Utilizing upwards of 200 micrograms a day, bare minimum, as preventive maintenance, but upwards of 400, 600, 800, or even 1,000 micrograms of this food-grown form of selenium to reverse the cancer like no other trace mineral can do. And rather than believe the FDA in their corrupt study of yesteryear that says selenium can be toxic to you, the form that we're talking about is not a synthetic isolate, a food-grown form. We can take large quantities without concerning ourselves with selenotoxicity, and it will greatly benefit the cancer patients almost more than anything else. Selenium, among all others, may be the most important, and I never want to say it's the only thing, but it's one of the biggest.
So Robert, talk about the plant-based diet should be a staple in order to not only stay healthy to prevent disease, but if you have been diagnosed with cancer. Specifically, this whole interview series, this investigative report that I'm doing, is focused on preventing cancer.
Right.
And when you look at the statistics of the World Health Organization in 2010, they said of the people that are alive today, 1 in 2 men, 1 in 3 women are going to face a cancer diagnosis. This information needs to get out there. People need to know how they can eat to prevent this.
A whole food, predominantly plant-based diet is an anti-cancer diet, period. There are more anti-cancer medicines in a diverse whole food diet than the cancer industry will ever come up with regardless of how many billions of dollars they spend on research. There are anti-cancer compounds in celery, anti-cancer compounds in beets, anti-cancer compounds in the white stuff inside the orange peel.
Mm-hmm.
When you peel the orange peeling off, you should leave that white layer on
Yeah,
the oranges,
that's
on the
right.
pieces.
Yes.
Eat as much of that as possible. It's anti-cancer.
Mm.
Anti-cancer elements in red wine and red grapes,
Right.
resveratrol, we talked about. Anti-cancer elements in seeds and nuts. There's so many that modern science, it'll take us hundreds of years to even begin to understand the anti-cancer potential that's found in a grocery store right now.
Yeah. I honestly believe that there are more, it would be harder to list, it would be harder to find the whole foods that don't contain
It's true.
cancer-fighting properties
Yeah.
than it would be to just pick one, and you could just pick any of them. They all have some kind of different methods by which they would help prevent cancer or treat cancer.
It reminds me of a question a traditional Chinese medicine master once asked me when we were having discussions in nature about what's healing. And he asked me this very powerful but simple question. We were in a forest, and he said, "Look around. Find me something around here in the forest. Find me something that is not medicine." And I couldn't.
You couldn't do it.
I couldn't. Everything around us was medicine in one form or another. Even the soil beneath our feet, the microbes in the soil are medicine. The minerals in the stones are medicine.
It all
The
is.
chemical constituents in the tree bark are traditional Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
A lot of those are tree barks. The herbs, the plants, everything had a medicinal component. Even the sky, the sunlight was medicinal. The water in the plants,
Vitamin D,
medicinal.
Yeah.
I couldn't find anything that wasn't medicine. And so when people tell me, when they come up to me and they say things like, "I don't know what to do about cancer, I've tried everything." Have you tried nature?
Yeah.
Have you, I bet you on the way to your cancer clinic, you walked by nature. You walked by some plants that probably have anti-cancer medicines in them.
I guarantee they did.
I used to live in the desert in Arizona, and there were anti-cancer treatment centers there where in the parking lots had anti-cancer plants, desert plants, They're very potent.
And they probably were better treatments than were inside.
Absolutely. So people would park their cars, ignoring the medicine right there for free,
Yeah.
and they would walk inside the cancer treatment center and get poisoned and pay for it and wonder why they were still sick. That's how messed up the cancer industry is today.
That is the insanity that we call the cancer industry today.
Yeah. Literally, in many parts of Arizona, you can just go out in the wild and you can harvest masses of anti-cancer desert plants.
Sure.
Wildcrafted for free.
Yeah. I know. It's nuts.
Yeah.
It really is. Well, Mike, that reminds me of the old mantra from Hippocrates, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food.
Yeah.
That, I think, if we could sum up what we've talked about today, if we can get whole plant-based diet, whole food to treat cancer, to prevent cancer, that would be the direction we should go.
That is a sustainable path for humanity. Let me be very...
What are the most important foods, in your opinion, that have medicinal value that can help to prevent disease, cancer?
Well, the first thing there is to be well hydrated, good quality water. I'm against fluoride in water. I'm against chlorine if possible. I'm fortunate we have an artesian well. I like mineral water, spring water. I'm not a big fan of the alkaline water process. But certainly the body has to be well hydrated. And what's important about that, Ty, you may not know this, but any addictive process, whether it's cocaine or heroin or coffee or cigarettes, is tougher to break if the person is dehydrated. So the first thing I do with someone who's, for example, an addict, is I rehydrate and I stabilize blood sugar. Now what's interesting about nicotine, for example, it clears the system quicker if you're dehydrated. so the patient's reaching for another cigarette. But if you're well hydrated, they're not quite sure when the nicotine left their system. So it's the same thing. Cancer, all the illnesses we pay attention to are less problematic if the person's well hydrated. And water is a tremendous anti-inflammatory, of course. So I'm a fan of anti-inflammatory diets. I'm a fan of eating real food, eating living food. It's astonishing to me that we even have this category called junk food. I like to tell my patients, there's no such thing as junk food. There's food and there's junk, and even though the junk can taste like food, it's not food. It's really not going to do what food should do, which is nourish you.
It's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it?
It is, indeed. And the thing which I've paid a lot of attention to recently is eating seeds. Now, I'm going to use that term generally. Seeds would include nuts. It would include beans. Anything which you can put in the ground and it'll grow. A pea would be a seed in that regard. Eggs, something like that. Caviar in particular, fabulous.
Okay.
So seeds are tremendously valuable because the seed is such a wise little packet. It concentrates nutrients about 20-fold and 30-fold more than the rest of the fruit. So it's this fabulous packet of concentrated nutrition. And what we know is that it's got all sorts of genetic spare parts. If it's not going to be a seed that grows into a plant, that's available for you and I to repair our DNA and our RNA with. It also has tremendous stem cell precursors, especially in the husk of seeds. So I encourage my patients to drink plenty of water. I like the urine to be, light, and I encourage them to eat seeds and nuts, raw, organic, non-X-rayed, non-radiated, as much as possible, and green leafy vegetables and so forth.
Okay, so a living diet, a living food diet.
Yeah, life comes from life, exactly. Yeah. But on the other hand, I had this gal today was saying to me, I eat a very strict diet, but sometimes I cheat. I said, great, good. Sometimes have a blast. We're not. The goal isn't. We're taught in school. It's not whether you win or lose. It's how you play the game. And once you get cancer, everybody forgets that. I just need to prolong life. So the real challenge is to keep the quality and the quantity.
I've done extensive research on what's called the metals capturing capacity of different types of foods. I call it the MCC, where I test using a synthetic gastric acid digestion simulator that I built in the lab. I test foods versus contaminants, and I find out how much of the contaminant gets bound to the food and thereby carried out of your digestive tract as insoluble fiber, rather than being absorbed through your intestinal walls and going into your blood. Okay. This is a key concept to understand to answer your question. Processed foods have very low capturing capacity because the fibers are typically processed out of them. They're also structurally compromised through processing. They're denatured.
Right.
In other words,
which makes them into unfood.
Unfood. So if you eat, let's say, a processed food meal or a beverage that is contaminated with, let's say, 10 parts per million of mercury, you are likely to absorb the vast majority of that mercury through your intestinal walls that goes into your blood. Or it could be radioactive cesium-137.
Okay.
Mercury, cesium, lead, cadmium,
whatever it might be.
Right. But if you are eating a diet of unprocessed fresh foods, this is a whole plant-based diet. Right. It doesn't have to be 100% plants. What we have found is that natural plants, fresh produce, such as strawberries, have very high natural metals capturing capacity. They're able to bind with the metals, mostly through physical processes of absorption and adsorption as well. Some foods have selective ionic affinity to specific metals such as lead.